Thank you for joining Literally Alive. My name is Robert Diamante. Tonight we will be launching Literal Book's newest work of fiction, Immigrants, by Art Dingley. Welcome, Art.
Hi, Rob.
Art Dingley was born in Farmington and grew up in Concord Plantation near Bingham, Maine. He spent his childhood hunting, fishing, and camping with his father and grandfathers. Art's first trip into North Maine woods was at the age of 10 with his cousins. They made it all the way to the 9 Mile Bridge in February, where they camped in an old repurposed delivery truck. He has returned many times since to hunt, fish, canoe, and explore. With his father, he canoed from Sabumuk to Chisuncook to Kakamagamak. Did I get that right, Art?
Yeah, close enough.
All right. To Allagash Lake, I practiced that all afternoon, and down into Chamberlain Lake, returning twice later on his own. With his sons and his sisters, and with excellent friends, Art has fished many ponds in Baxter Park and summited Katahdin more times than he can count, twice in the winter. With his friend and their intrepid children, he has hiked the length of the Appalachian Trail in Maine. He is a graduate of the University of Maine and the University of Maine School of Law. After working 10 years as an attorney, he graduated from the University of New England College of Osteopathic Medicine, completing his residency at Wake Forest Medical Center and Maine Medical Center. Welcome, Art, once again. You retired at the age of 70, right? After 25
Yes.
years in medicine. You live in Auburn with your wife, Tammy. And now you're an author. Is this your first novel? Like this is your first full-length novel?
Yeah, it sure is. And thank you for using the word author and not writer. I don't identify myself as a writer. When we think about the writers Maine has produced, starting with Henry Longfellow, Kenneth Roberts, Sarah Orne Jewett, Henry Beston, Elizabeth Cosworth, E.B. White, Arthur McDougall, Louise Dickinson, Rich, Helen Hamlin, Carolyn Shute, who should have won the National Book Award, by the way, Annie Proulx, Stephen King, Agnes Bushell, Paul Doiron, Richard Cass. That's just a warm up. I mean, you could continue that list. I'm not a writer. I'm a guy who wrote a book.
Okay. Have you written any other
Well,
short
yeah,
fiction or?
the book Immigrants came about in an unexpected way. I was working on another book, which I actually like, but it was.
And you don't
Uh,
like immigrants? I mean, I'm hoping you.
I like it a lot, but it came about in an unexpected way. I was working on a book I liked, and then it became a chore. And I said, I'm going to step away from it. And when I did, the idea for Immigrants came to me. And the total idea, which appeared in my head as though by email, was the two characters, Micah and Miriam, and the place where they lived. That was it. And so every day I let the characters tell me their stories, and it was sort of a ministerial act. I wrote it down. What they told me, I wrote down until
Okay.
it was done. And that was the whole process.
Sorry, I don't mean to keep interrupting, but I just want to, before we go much further, for those that haven't read the book yet or who have read the book, um, who is Michael Mukusik and who is Miriam? Who are the two main characters and what is the nature of that relationship? Just sort of level set. And then I want to talk about
Sure.
Deep Lake as a character and like it's the setting of the book. So
For sure. Well, let me take those in reverse order. Deep Lake, the non-existent town of Deep Lake, which is made up, if it existed, would be on Maine Route 11, north of Patton, south of Fort Kent, west of Presque Isle, east of the North Maine Woods and the Maine-Canadian border. There's not much going on in Deep Lake. There's a transfer station, which folks who would live in Deep Lake would call the dump. There's the post office, there's the fire barn slash town office, and the little market. And you've all been in the little market. It has gas pumps out front, it sells propane, it sells ice and things you might need, groceries, clothes. um, et cetera, et cetera. The DeLorme Atlas, 100% DEET, and those big chocolate chip cookies wrapped in plastic on
Yeah.
the counter. Um, and in the town of Deep Lake, we find Micah McCusick, who lives in Deep Lake, but is not from there. He's from down south in Millinocket. He left to go to college, came back, began law school, quit at the behest of his wife, and moved north to Millinocket, where they both grew up. Um, the town of Millinocket was not what they remembered from their childhood or what they expected. This job came up in Deep Lake. They moved there, and his wife can't stand it, leaves. So now he's on his own, trying to construct some vision of his future. What is his life going to be? He doesn't know. He's sort of sad and alone. Also living in town is Mariam Badawi. Mariam is an Arab woman
She's in
from.
Deep Lake, though, not Millinocket.
She's in Deep Lake. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Everybody's in Deep Lake. Um, she, as a child, lived in Israel in the Negev desert, and her father was murdered by members of another tribe in some business deal gone bad.
When you say, hold on, let's stop there for a moment because this is I think an important distinction. Even though she lived in Israel, she was a member of a tribe, but she was a member of a Bedouin tribe. She's Muslim.
Sure. Yeah.
So, I
Yeah.
mean, when you say tribe in Israel, people think of the 12 tribes of Israel.
Yeah. 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 So her mother feels unprotected and vulnerable, and she leaves and takes little Miriam. They go to Jordan. Jordan, not so good. They go to Syria, even worse. They go back to Jordan and end up in a refugee camp in Jordan. Um, they don't want to go back to Israel. Mother does not want to take her back there, and they convince the United Nations High Commission on Refugees that they are Syrians who have lost their passports, become refugees, and have the good fortune to go to America. They go to Minneapolis, then to Boston, and then buy this little market in northern Maine. So that's how the principal characters get to Deep Lake, and then other characters are sort of added and introduced to backfill around those two.
Yeah, Miriam is about Micah's age, right? They're sort of they're contemporary.
Yeah, they're both about to turn 30, yes.
Yeah. So we won't go into too much of the details about that, but it is a romance book. You've described it as a romance, right? Or a love.
Well, I describe it as a love story. I think calling a book written by a man a romance is like calling his new haircut a hairdo. I'm not sure that the words are quite right.
We we could probably talk about that until the cows come home, right? But there's another character in here. Do you want to introduce her now, or do you want to read a little bit?
I can read a little bit, and we can introduce her as I read, I think.
Yeah, yeah. That would
Sure.
be that would be good. I think if you read it and then we talk about her afterwards and how she sort of figures into the intrigue of the story.
Sure. So the book begins with a news item from the non-existent Bangor newspaper, The Examiner, dated March 23rd. As follows. Yesterday, game wardens in the remote area of northern Maine, known only as T11R17, reported the death of a snowmobiler whose body was found near a branch of the St. John River, approximately 10 miles from the Canadian border. The cause of death has not been determined. New snow has made the investigation difficult, but wardens say the snowmobiler crossed from Canada into Maine, either intentionally or by accident. It was still dark, and Micah filled his tank under a canopy of stars. The front window of Nahal Market glowed faintly. He caught a glimpse of Mariam Badawi making her way toward the back of the market from the bungalow she shared with her mother, Hannah. Mariam was wearing an orange toque over a headscarf, the very picture of cultural improv, he thought. They waved to each other as she disappeared behind the chain link pen of propane tanks. He slapped the pump handle back in place and heard her thumping up the wooden steps, and an oval neon sign announced that the market was open. He made his way around the filthy green F-250 and up to the front door, only to find it still locked. He could hear Miriam yelling, "All right already." She let him in. "Well, excuse me for being 7 minutes late." "No problem. I guess there's no coffee made. Use the Keurig. If there's no K-cups, look underneath." "What are you doing at this hour? You're not even working." "It's mud season." In northern Maine, where the economy depends on tree harvesting, trucks and machinery can't operate once the ground begins to thaw. Operators scale back and workers have plenty of free time until the earth firms up. "You know, it's the first day of fishing season. I'm heading up to my best place. It's a long haul." "Ha! The roads are shit. The ice won't be out. The bugs will start up. Total nightmare. Stay home." She had just enough Middle Eastern accent to give her cursing a special punch. The Keurig sputtered and hissed as it shot 12 ounces of coffee into his travel mug. "And what's with the headscarf? Are you a hijabi now?" "Maybe I am. I just feel like covering myself more. The Carhartt yahoos are all out of work and they'll hang around here all the time. Good for business, but they're always trying to look down my shirt and they stare at my ass whenever they can." "Not guilty." "Well, not very guilty, like in a misdemeanor kind of way. You're not the worst, but it was being with Ellie that kept you good. Now I suppose we'll see." Micah drove away from the market across Route 11 and down the gravel lake road into the woods. He stopped at Filson Gate, but just to visit. Alice recognized him in the wave. She was sitting behind the pine paneled counter, surrounded by racks of maps, postcards, and North Maine Woods merchandise. "What are you up to at dark 30, young man? I guess you must be working. Otherwise, I might have to charge you for day use." "Work? Yes, driving over these roads is very hard work in April." "Who's still hauling? Anyone?" "Irving's hauling some, but they'll be done next week. Seven Isles and Sappy are done. The job is a rollout for 6 weeks, but you know that being one of them." "Where are you headed? Not every road is open right now." "I'll stay on the reality road pretty much," he said, using the universal mispronunciation. "Uh-huh. You've got more canoes hidden in the bushes than anyone else I know. Good luck. Bring me a trout." 10-4. I got ahead. 3 miles east of Clayton Lake, Micah turned south from the muddy, potholed American Realty Road onto a narrow, rocky track crowded by alders. The windshield was opaque except for hazy arcs left by his wiper blades. He turned left again with more caution now onto an unused, overgrown hauling road that led gently down to Grass Pond, where one of his several canoes was stashed in a cedar grove. So to take a break from reading right here, I think we can talk a little bit about the nature of the North Maine woods, what that a big patch of trees uh, really is. And North Maine Woods is a sort of a consortium. I can't really recite the legal structure of it, but it came about like this. In the 60s and 70s, it was discovered that the lots, the acreage reserved in each township to the state of Maine had been logged by the paper companies as though they owned all of it. And this was resolved by the paper companies, the big landowners, giving the state of Maine big tracts of beautiful land, typically around waterways, lakes, and rivers. And so now you had these big swaths of public land, which were the consolidation of these lots, which couldn't be accessed. And this was resolved by a series of gates through which the public may pass into the working forest for the payment of a fee, pay to play. Tell the gatekeeper how many in your party, where you're going, how long you're staying. And if you're old like me, you get a discount. And off you go. Watch out for trucks because they're coming at you, taking their half out of the middle at 50 miles an hour, and they don't care. Um, and so that's how we access the North Maine Woods to the public lands and to the campsites along the waterways to hunt, fish, snowmobile. So it's a win-win, I think, for everyone. And so that's the North Maine Woods. It's a working forest. There's no pristine wilderness in Maine. The land has been cut and cut again. Every 20 years it's cut.
Mhm.
And it has traditionally, although that may be changing, been monoculture. The goal is to grow balsam fir
Mhm.
because these are big fiber farms, really. 4-inch wood is the same as 12-inch wood.
So this is a really interesting demystification of the map when you look at it, because anybody who's not from there, who hasn't extensively explored it like you have, would look at a map and say, boy, that's a lot of trees up there and a lot of space and no roads. And yet you're saying that there's actually a, a lot of activity up there, and it's centered around, out the outdoors. I mean, cut
Yeah,
lumber, definitely lumbering, but it's also outdoor recreation. The North Maine Woods has a lot of land that it owns that's public space, right? Isn't that?
yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so these two things coexist. There's the recreational use and the commercial use.
Uh-huh. And you mentioned, not to go too much further, but we generally know where the border crossings are.
Yeah,
There's Jackman, there's Calais, there's
yeah,
Eastport.
Cobb and Gore.
Yeah. So we know where those are, but then you have Daquam on here, or Daquam, however you want to say it, which is,
Yeah, well,
talk
they're,
about the
they're,
nature of the border in that area, because it's really interesting, and it
yeah,
plays it plays strongly into the novel.
yeah. Well, the number of border crossings in Maine, the location of the border crossings along the Maine-Quebec border have changed over the last 100 years. So there's nothing at Daquam. Daquam used to be a settlement. It used to be a border crossing. It's not now. And the bridge between Clayton Lake and Daquam is out. So you can't even drive to Daquam, I don't think. You might come down the Depot Road, but I don't think you could get over the St. John.
Was that public, or was it specifically for the lumbering industry, so they didn't have to go all the way around?
Well, I don't know. I assume everybody could cross. Like Lac Frontier was another one, and Helen Hamlin talks about this in her book a lot. Lac Frontier was the closest place to a 9 Mile Bridge where they live. Now, 9 Mile Bridge was put across the St. John River by a Canadian lumber baron named Lacroix, who bought the bridge or took it off someone's hands and trucked it a piece at a time to the St. John River and installed it to replace the ferry that was there. The bridge is now gone. So when we talk about Daquam or we talk about 9 Mile, these are place names. There's no 9 Mile Bridge now.
Mhm.
There is a bridge at Hannibal's Crossing, but not at 9 Mile at all.
Let's get back. Let's just get back to the novel, though, and talk about the border in relation to Deep Lake and Micah and some of the other characters, like how the border could you use border as a motif, a physical motif between Canada and the United States, but
Yeah,
there's also the borders of the heart and the sort of the
yeah.
relationship between Micah and his ex-wife, or soon to be ex-wife, and Miriam. So the border as a motif in your book is really interesting, and you use it. Um, how would you talk about that? How do you talk about that? Like,
Well, I wanted to pick an area that's remote enough where the events described as regards people going back and forth are possible. The big border crossings like Coburn Gore, like Jackman and so forth, wouldn't really accommodate that kind of a story. I don't think it wouldn't be that believable. But in a long, long stretch of border, which is no longer perforated by formal border crossings. Some of these are only open for commercial traffic, by the way. St. Palmfield, which is a big one, is only open certain days of the week at certain times, for example. And St. Palmfield Crossing is the one that one of the characters in the book uses a lot to go back and forth to go back, so it's mentioned. But otherwise, these old border crossings are just sealed up.
this might
Um,
be a good time to introduce. We've been sort of dancing around this third character. Um,
sure.
do you want to introduce her
So,
now? Or I mean, maybe by reading something, or do you want to talk
yeah,
about Lena Chernin now?
yeah, I can talk about how Micah meets Lena Chernin, which I think is a good story.
Mhm.
So Micah gets to Grass Pond. He's going fishing, It's the one thing that makes him feel better at this point in his life. And it's the first day of fishing season, so he's very revved up for that. He stepped out onto the muddy ground, honeycombed with frost. He took his net, rod, creel paddle, and PFD from the back seat. There were ragged clouds in the blue April sky. Micah could feel the cold breath of winter in the gentle westerly breeze, which left a riffle on the water. He dropped the anchor and felt it bite 25 feet below. Stripping out floating line, he cast toward the north shore. The grasshopper bounced off the lip of ice, coming to rest in the water where it floated, bobbing gently. He took in line slowly until there was no slack. A trout took the fly with a flash and a splash of crimson and gold, the heft of it telling him it was a very good fish. He returned the very good fish unharmed to the frigid water and caught 3 more, then sat perfectly still, feeling the sun, the cold breeze, the rhythm of his breath. He felt the undertow of sadness that held him for weeks lose its grip, felt himself floating away like a red balloon over miles of woods and waters. But there was something else he realized, something unexpected hidden in the cold air. Wood smoke. There were no camps or campgrounds anywhere near. No forest fire could take hold now in this place. He scanned the shoreline, all of his senses keen, watching with the intensity of a deer hunter. And there it was, the faintest puff of blue smoke dispersed by the wind just before it cleared the pointed firs that ringed the pond. It took 30 minutes for him to locate the campsite, circle around, and approach it from the east. The snow was knee-deep in places. From behind a stand of fir, the height of Christmas trees, he had a good view. The binoculars gave him enough detail to see a young woman crouched at her campfire. She had pushed away the smoldering snow and had relit her tinder and kindling. She added broken dead branches from a pile she'd gathered. Her hair was thick and separated into big tendrils. Her face and hands were dirty. She looked dejected, he thought. His first instinct was to approach her from his hiding place to ask whether she needed help, but he could imagine too many ways for this to go wrong. It was none of his business anyhow. He would stop at the warden station at Zaskus, give report, and let the law handle it. So that was how Micah discovered Lena Chernin camping in the woods. And you can see Zaskus, Clayton Lake, and Daquam, and so forth, that stretch in the Gazetteer. But suffice it to say that it would be extremely difficult for anyone to get to the place where he finds her camping. How did she even get there? Did she walk 30, 40 miles through really, really tough country in the dead of winter? Did she get a ride there somehow? Is there some connection between her and this dead snowmobile that the wardens found shortly before that, a few days before? So that was how he meets her. Um,
She figures rather strongly into the novel through.
well, she does. She does, but he doesn't. He just leaves when he sees her camping in the woods. None of his business. He's not getting into this. He's going to stop at the warden station in Zaskus, tell Roger, the game warden,
Mhm.
that he's seen this woman camping. Maybe he should check it out and see what she's doing there. But the ranger's not there. The warden's not there. So he just goes home. And he's going to call the ranger when he gets home, forgets to do it. Um, so actually, it's in chapter 3 that he meets Lena. And he is getting up early in the morning. It was still snowing at 6 a.m. as he pushed out of his driveway and turned south on Route 11. He plowed Davis Owens' place. Owens had never asked him to do it, but had never made any other arrangements. He swiped the snow off his lights and the crew cab windows and stomped up the steps of the market, slapping his gloves against the leg of his nylon pants. Miriam was filling one of 4 coffee carafes. She was wearing an abaya and a headscarf. Decaf for you, right? She called. Yeah, the high test makes me all angry. Like with Kershaw, the Border Patrol agent yesterday. No, that was just my baseline. You're all kind of hijab today. Getting back to your roots? You're Islamophobic. I can feel it. Not me. You guys just hate America. He pushed down on the handle of the carafe labeled Power Line and pumped a 12-ounce cup of dark roast, his left arm brushing her shoulder. Neither gave any sign of having noticed it, but of course they had. So he heads back up into the woods and he's taking his snowmobile with him. There was room to turn around and offload the Polaris just where he had hoped. He let it run while he got the ramps back into the truck, locked up, and got his gloves and helmet out of the tunnel bag. The new snow made for good travel. He crossed the tracks of fisher, moose, deer, and coyote. A partridge exploded out of its den in a shower of snow. Halfway to Churchill Dam Road, he found her tracks heading east and turned in pursuit. In half a mile, she had blundered through an old hillside clear cut, which he could not navigate directly, the slash being too much a trap for the skis. He moved cautiously among small balsam firs at the base of the hill, looking for any way forward. She fell face down, and he was close to her in seconds. He raised his face shield and yelled, "Hey, good morning. I'm a friend. Listen to me. Look at me, please." She turned her head in his direction, her face contorted by fear, rage, or fatigue, maybe all three. "Border Patrol is looking for you for something. I'm not here to turn you in, but you have to come with me. You're going to die." He swung his leg over the sled, standing clear, and took off his helmet. "Come on, let's get you up if you can do it. Can you stand up if I help you?" He stepped up beside her. "I'm going to put my arm under your right arm and pull you up, pack and all. Is that okay?" "May I do that, please?" She let out a series of loud sobs. "I'm taking that as a yes. Okay, here we go. Ready?" Getting her upright was disturbingly easy. She could not have weighed more than 100 pounds without the pack. She did not shake his hand. It seemed like a long time before she spoke. "Lena, I'm Lena." Clearly, English was not her first language. What is that accent, he thought. And so he scooped up Lena on his snow machine. He takes her back out to the truck. He's no friend of Border Patrol. Border Patrol appears to be looking for her for some reason. He decides, rather impulsively, to smuggle her back into town and to try to find out what's going on, but not to tell Border Patrol that he's found her. So that's how he meets Lena.
Hmm.
And Lena, getting into it by reading, tells one lie after another about what she's doing there. And they're great lies, fantastic stories about why she's in the middle of the Maine woods and the tragic things that befell her back in Belarus and Russia and Canada and yada yada. All sounds very believable. It's all made up. And the story evolves over the next 50 pages or so.
Very colorful character. And you also sort of set up this kind of operation, this sort of like border operation that even goes beyond her, sort of intimating that the border up there is less porous than we think, that it's actually, pretty, it's got some punctures in it, and that there's people coming back and being smuggled across, back and forth.
Yeah.
Why did I don't think we should go into the like where she actually is from and all of that kind of stuff. I don't want to give away too much because that's the beauty of the mystery of this novel, right? But I want to ask you why you chose to make Miriam and Hannah Muslim and then Lena also from another place. Um, Talk a little bit about your decisions in creating these characters. And
I
let me put a parentheses in there. You live in Lewiston, which
yes,
had a major influx of immigration over the last 20 years.
yeah,
So
it is.
so put all of that in context in your writing.
Wow. Well, that's a
And that's
big
a lot.
discussion.
I know it is, but we've got
that's,
time. We've
that's a
got
big
time. And we
discussion.
can.
But let me say this: Maine has been subject to waves of immigration for thousands of years, and I think that immigration is a reciprocal process. That is, immigrants who move into an area change the culture of that area. and they are in turn changed by it. The most recent iteration of that, before the East Africans came to Lewiston, was the French-Canadian immigration into Maine, the Acadian French out of the Maritimes and New Brunswick into the St. John Valley, and the Quebecois who came to the mill towns.
Distinct cultures, by the way. People conflate those sometimes, Acadian and a Quebecois, unless you're from here.
Sure.
People
Well,
sometimes conflate those cultures.
they shared a language, albeit with different accents. And Helen Hamlin talks about that too in her book, 9 Mile Bridge. She grew up in Madawaska, and she had real trouble understanding the Quebecois lumberjacks. And they were all speaking French. What the Acadians and the Quebecois had in common was that they were Roman Catholic. Mm-hmm. And they were coming into a basically Protestant English culture state. And the religious divide acted as a brake on the reciprocal influence of these two cultures, because the logical conclusion of the merger of these two cultures is marriage and children. That's where it's headed. Like rivers run to the sea. That's what's going to happen every time. And it did finally, but it didn't really happen until the 70s, when the Woodstock generation moved out on its own, got jobs, finished college, and was ready to get married. And the Woodstock generation was not only being pushed around by its parents, and they were going to marry who they wanted to marry. And all the parents were very upset that people were marrying Catholics and Protestants and so forth. And the kids said, live with it. And in the book, the expression, like the Berlin Wall coming down in slow motion, is used to describe that process. Well, now, in this iteration, we have East Africans and people from the MENA, Middle East, North Africa, who are from several different cultures, of course, but who are unified by Islam. Mm-hmm. And so Islam will act as a brake on this reciprocal process of influence leading to marriage and children. That's where that's headed. And that will happen. And how do we know it will happen? Well, because it always has in every immigration scenario.
So in Lewiston, let me break right there. So in Lewiston, you're observing this 20 years ago.
There's another influence too, and it's described by Catherine Besteman in her very excellent book, Making Refuge. Catherine Besteman's an anthropologist from Colby who met the Bantu Somalis in Somalia, where she was doing field research. And as luck would have it, the Bantu Somalis became refugees, and many of them came to America and came to Lewiston. So she was able to actually reconnect with people she knew from Somalia. And she makes the point that in Somali culture, it's the elders who run things. They are the deciders. They have all the agency. In America, that's not true. And in America, your agency comes from your English skills and your tech skills, because those are the things that position you for education, which positions you for mobility, upward mobility, and so forth. And so the young people, the young East Africans, especially those born here in the last 20 years who are now college age, are not going to always look to or follow the elders. And this has stood things on its head for that community in some ways. And so that's all being sorted out too. So that's another thing that's going on in Lewiston right now as we speak.
But this is a process, as you pointed out earlier, that happens amongst pretty much all immigrant groups as they integrate into other cultures. I mean, I
think so.
Italians, Irish, generationally,
sure.
Integrating. forgetting old ways, things like that.
Yeah, I think this is another example of it. And I think that as because Islam will act as a brake upon that reciprocal process of change to some degree for some period of time. We don't know how long or what that's going to look like, but it'll happen.
But bringing it back to the novel, so Miriam is Muslim and she's very Americanized. I mean, she's been through college, right? She's
Sure.
educated.
Yeah.
Um, she's very savvy. She's got a great wit, great sarcasm. She matches Micah quite strongly in terms of dialogue and wit, as I mentioned. And but she's devout. I mean, she maintains her at the essence of Islam. She's very
Well, something interesting is going on with Miriam, of course. Instead of becoming less devout,
that's right.
her iman, her faith is actually increasing slowly, which is the opposite of what you might expect from someone who's been Americanized. You'd expect maybe her religious faith to fade out. I think it's probably asymptotic. It tails off. It's probably a normal distribution in terms of how devout Muslims are. Um, on the one end, you have the sort of Wahhabi purism, and on the other tail, at the other end of the distribution, you have people like Mehmet Oz, who will, under careful questioning, identify as a Muslim because his parents and grandparents were Muslim, which is kind of a freakish thing if you think about it, because in that maneuver, you have racialized your religion. You've said, well, being a Muslim is an inherited genetic condition. It's not. And so Miriam is actually moving up the scale of being devout. Her iman, as Islam would say, is increasing as the book progresses. She becomes more, now she's adopting modest dress. She has a prayer rug in her office, and da 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 da. So, in a subtle way, in an understated way, you see this increasing over the course of the book, which is
And
sort of
Micah's very respectful of that. He's in very subtle ways. I mean, you sort of bake that into the novel. He walks around her prayer rug. He
takes
has
off his shoes.
adopted their language. He even hosts a dinner after their fast break. After the
Yeah, yes, yeah. He throws an Eid al-Fitr party for
yeah,
Miriam and Hannah and so forth, and gets on with her uncle, who's the big Arab from the Negev desert, who comes to visit his sister in Deep Lake Hannah.
the sort of the Islamic version of Corleone.
Yeah,
Vito Corleone.
that's right. That's right. He does favors for
He
people.
was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Um, okay, we have a couple questions. Religion didn't stop Catholics from marrying Protestants for a very long time. For very long. It may be longer with Islam, possibly. I wondered if there were a difference between inland and coast on how quickly social cultural integration takes place. That's a really interesting comment. I don't recall much of an issue in the 50s in Brunswick with Catholic/Protestant weddings, as if maybe the oceans or, being near the ocean has an effect. Or maybe it's the concentration, Susan, if that's what you mean, of population, if that sort of quickening of population leads to quicker integration. You can feel free to type in something to elucidate that. And then Nate Dingley, loved listening to your talk about this, Dad. Got to put Raymond to bed. So that's your grandson?
Yes.
Okay. Congratulations on that.
Well, I
Um,
don't know about whether that type of integration would proceed more um, quickly or easily in one part of the state versus another. I mean, one thing you can say about the geographic, the characters um, who live in Deep Lake is that they're all independent as hogs on ice. They pretty much do what they damn well want. Characters like Camille Grandin, for example, they're uh,
who is Where's he from? You wanna,
Well, Camille Grandin's a Canadian
yeah.
who works in the North Maine woods of Maine logging. He has his own logging truck and he
He's
hauls wood.
Quebecois, right? He's Quebecois.
Quebecois.
He's the only character too where you actually um um write in the dialect, write in his dialect. I mean, we have to imagine that sort of northern Maine
Yeah.
accent
Yeah.
as we read. I'm sure Micah has an accent. I'm sure that Miriam has an accent.
Mhm.
You thankfully don't burden your dialogue with those dialects. But for some reason, when you introduce Camille, that really works. It really works because you can hear it.
No, thank you.
Yeah. So why did you decide to do that? Why did you decide to do it with him and not with the other characters?
I just felt like with the Quebecois accent, you had to be all in with it. You can't do it in a halfway. And he doesn't talk all that much. There are three or four
Yeah.
pages of dialogue with Camille, so I don't think it became oppressive just because there wasn't that much of it.
Yeah. And it actually really worked because it really set him apart as a character because he has a really specific role.
Mhm.
Although he's a minor character, a small character, he has a
Yeah, yeah,
really
yeah.
pivotal role in some of
And I
them.
did a little bit of a Southern accent too with Trey Kershaw, the Border Patrol agent, who's from Texas and transfers
Oh, that's right.
to
Yeah.
Maine
Another.
to get away from his ex-wives in Texas. All his exes live in Texas.
Yeah.
Uh,
He was a
that
big
guy.
old boy, good old
Yeah,
boy. As
yeah,
having
yeah.
having spent my life in part of my life in Texas, I could totally relate to that character as well. Um, okay, so I think we have time for a little more reading if you'd like, maybe just a short something or other about either Rena or the romance. I'm going to let you dealer's choice. How about that?
Yeah. All right. I'm going to read from chapter 19, page 123, because this is um, uh, Hannah invites Micah over to dinner, and Hannah hasn't really butted into the evolving relationship between Miriam and Micah, but she now has some advice for them. So I think it's illustrated. Hannah answered the door. Micah, come in. Yes, leave your boots right there. We're eating in the kitchen instead of in front of the TV because you're special. Mrs. Badawi, I'm honored and special, I agree. Thank you for having me. He excused himself to wash his hands and then took his seat at the table. Miriam was taking naan bread off her oven rack. She laid a plate stacked with round, thin loaves on the table and a platter of lamb and vegetable mansaf. She poured strong, sweet black tea. She washed her hands and took her place at the table, bowing her head briefly in prayer. Bismillah, Bismillah, Micah added, folding hands folded in his lap. In the name of God. He saw that Hannah was watching him, cool and introspective. Miriam, this is very good of you. Thank you for asking me to dinner. You've worked all day and done this for me, too. It was Hannah who replied, Micah, I understand from Miriam that you're in the process of divorce from Ellie. Is this right? Miriam rolled her eyes. Mom, don't be rude. Maybe it's none of your business. You're being embarrassing. Oh, no, I don't mind talking about it. Yes, she filed for divorce. She apparently took up with an old boyfriend. It's been hard for me, but I guess that's the way it goes. What can you do? Hannah considered what to say next. I'm sorry for your situation. My concern is this. You're basically a single man who's been keeping company with my daughter. What do you intend? Mom, will you stop it, please? Miriam, your father is no longer with us. May Allah be pleased with him. And these matters fall to me. Micah, this is difficult. In our culture, in the place we were born, a young woman can be controlled to some degree by her family. True, the control is only financial in this century, but tradition has a strong pull. Young Bedouin people behave as they're expected to behave. In America, young people do as they please, and it's the parents who fall in line behind them in matters of companionship and marriage. Michael was listening attentively. Miriam is free to do as she likes. I can forbid her nothing. I know that she was probably with some men in college. She's beautiful, and she did not keep modest dress. Miriam was holding her head in her hands. Even so, she has returned to being observant, alhamdulillah, and it's very important in Islam to one's parents and honor their wishes. Hannah, I want you to know there's nothing like that going on with Miriam and me. Your daughter has been a good friend. We like spending time together. She's smart, educated, funny, hardworking, and embraces both her cultures, Bedouin and American. You've described a woman any man would be a fool to overlook. Do you understand my concern? Hannah, I'm not lying to you. You're not lying to me. No, maybe you lie to yourself. Hannah, you have nothing to worry about. Even if I had designs on Miriam, she has no interest in me. I have no money. I didn't finish my education. I work in the woods. I have nothing to offer any woman, and I'm certainly not in your daughter's league. Micah McCusick, you're falsely modest, and it's unbecoming. You're blameless in your marriage, and in this town, we would know very quickly if it were otherwise. You work and work. You're kind to others, especially those who cannot do for themselves. You do not drink more than a little, and you're handsome, very handsome, even though you dress like a beggar much of the time. Mom, please stop it. You're so embarrassing. You're a man any woman would be a fool to overlook. And Miriam, you do not lie to me, but I wonder whether you know your own heart. Here's the thing I want you to know. My brother Abbas is coming to America. He will fly into Bangor, rent a car, and come here to visit. He's very persuasive. He's not a bully, but he's used to getting his own way by making it worth one's while to do his bidding. He would pay for Miriam to continue her education to the highest level at any university. He would buy me and her an apartment in any city in the world. He would introduce us to kind, wealthy, pious men to be suitable husbands. Hannah, thank you. I can see you only want what's best for your daughter. I appreciate your concern for me, too. Thank you for that. Hannah was dispensing mercy after all, warning them to harden their hearts against the slings and arrows. He caught Miriam's look from across the table. It was her most inscrutable face. Um,
You're setting us up for either heartbreak or a happy ending. Do you want to make any comments
but
about how you decided to
I'm
end up the
setting up
book?
the classic Shakespearean tragedy. You know, the
You
great.
could be. I'm not going to give away the ending, but if you want to talk about how you proceed from there, I think you
Well,
could.
yeah, I think it could have gone at that point in the conversation. It could have gone either way. I didn't see the question is the final act going to be bodies all over the stage
Mhm.
uh, in the Shakespearean tradition? Or is there going to be some act of redemption right before the train hits the wall? Um, and like I say, I let the characters tell the story. And
I don't think we should tell the story. I think people should buy the book and read the book, and then they will find out how it does end. Anything else you want to say about immigrants specifically, or like something that people should know going into the book? And I will preface this question um, by saying, like, I really kept the Gazetteer close to me as a hint, just to sort of um, keep myself aligned with like relative distances and times and things like that, just to sort of
yeah,
not fool myself into believing that that it was easy for these characters to move around in this space.
yeah. Not always very easy, particularly in the winter. In the springtime, um,
What's
there is
easy?
maybe 3 months out of the year when it's easy to move around that country on roads. The rest of the time, not so much. Um, uh, it's made more difficult to understand, I think, unless you're really familiar by the fact that some of the places exist and some of the places described in the North Maine woods don't exist. So there is a Squirrel Mountain, but there's no Grass Pond, for example. There's no the ponds where Micah fishes are not to be found in the Gazetteer. The big roads that he takes to get to those places you can find.
Realty
Like,
Road is something which is on the map that goes to close to
yeah,
town, right?
yeah,
And,
yeah. And the Filson gate, the gate that he drives back and forth through to access the woods from the town of Deep Lake, of course, it doesn't exist.
did you name it Filson after the brand?
Yeah, yes. Good pickup. I can't afford
Um,
this stuff.
the so you yeah, I think taking those kind of fictional liberties are okay, but But it would have been more difficult if you didn't know that area and you were
Yeah,
making things up.
yeah.
I think that's something that's really important. Clearly have a great love for the North Woods. Um,
Well, yeah, and there's some things that they say write about what you know. And there are things in Immigrants that I know very well, and there are things that I don't know much about at all. And Agnes made the excellent point in the last installment of Literally Alive that the novelist is essentially inviting the reader into this dream state that you both share. It's almost a contract. And if you say something that contradicts the reader's education or experience, it knocks them out of the dream and it pisses them off. And they're not going to like you very much after that. And, um, if you want to talk to me about canoeing, about trout fishing and so forth, pack a lunch. But I've never put chains on a skidder. Um, I don't know anything about the repair of diesel equipment, and so I'll probably get hate mail from the people who do know about those things, who are going to point out that a John Deere skidder model 540 does not have that kind of brake bands. What is wrong with you?
we should
Um,
put this in context. Micah is essentially, he's a mechanic, essentially.
right? Yeah.
Okay, I don't know that we mentioned that before, but you do go into detail about his repairs. And I even thought to myself, wow, did you consult somebody on this?
And Mr. Google, yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, I had ideas about the range of work and the range of equipment that needs to be the work that is used in the woods, and how it's used,
Mhm.
and the likely ways in which it requires regular maintenance. But that was it. The rest of it I just researched.
I think a good way to end this, we've got 4 minutes left. If there are no questions, or if I mean, people feel free at this point to unmute themselves and congratulate Art. But I personally want to ask, where's your next trip?
I'm
Down
going
the
to
Allagash, up to the St.
uh,
John?
no. My son Zeb and I are going to Debuli. How'd I do, Peter? Is that good? Debuli? Yeah. He weed whacked me the other day for mispronouncing it Debuli. Up to Debuli. Debuli's way up there. It's public lands. You access it through a North Main Woods gate, pay to play, and we'll be staying up at Red River Camps, and that's right before Memorial Day weekend. Be the fourth year in a row we've done that.
Are
Magical
there
place.
still a lot of those old camps left? Because wasn't that an old camp?
Yeah, there are some, not as many as there were. I mean, you think of Tom Hegan camps and Pierce Pond camps. They're out there, but fewer and fewer. Red River Camps is there. It's there in perpetuity as long as it's operated as sporting camps, but can never be operated as anything else. Otherwise, it reverts. So,
Okay. Well, I really want to thank you. This has been a wonderful chat, and I think our audience is ready to read your book. And I think you really helped set up the context, the setting. We know the characters. You've developed some really strong characters. There's definitely intrigue, so there's mystery to this novel, and I'm glad we didn't give too much away about Lena and her role in this, which is really kind of an interesting development. And I think you did a fine job writing about love and romance. And
oh, thank you so much.
so whether it's about haircuts or hairdos, I think you did a great job. I've read plenty of romance from guys that have written it. I think The English Patient being one of them, one of my
Mm.
favorites. Um, so I think I'm excited to hear back from people, and hopefully you'll get some really good feedback from your friends when they read the book.
So, thank you.
Yeah. We've got some more things coming in. Martha Morrell says she enjoyed listening. Nice work. Susan Lowry, congratulations on the publication. I don't think I can make the live event, but here she is. I'm sorry, looking forward to reading. Oops, they're coming in. Congratulations, great introduction. All sorts of wonderful accolades there, Art. Congratulations again.
Good to know.
For those who have not left, The book is available on littoralbooks.com and along with other books. And join us next month. It's Poetry Month, April, and we're going to have some live readings. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Rob.